Good morning, everyone. And as per usual, when I've been leading these meditations, the first part we do some breathing meditation to focus the mind, and then the second part, a meditation focused around the text. And especially here today, going to focus on reflecting on our life regarding the mind of attachment, and how on the basis of this we may have performed destructive actions with our body and speech. And then from reflecting on this, generating within the mind a sense of strong regret about having done those actions, and arising the thought, the wish to purify where we may have caused harm based on the mind of attachment. So then, just to sit comfortably and to motivate well in relation to focusing the mind, the first part of the meditation, that if we're able to just spend this first few minutes in a focused way, then it makes the mind most conducive for engaging in the main body of the meditation and creating the right state of mind to receive the teachings today from Geshe Sutram, and then to engage in discussion and to be involved in the tutorial session with Yaki. So here, when we're doing this focusing meditation using the breath, it's not just simply to do this, just to do the practice without any particular motivation, and not just to do it with the motivation simply to quieten the mind, but rather with the idea, the bigger picture, that we use this method in order to pacify our mind and to create conducive conditions so that we can develop the wisdom and compassion in order to be of greatest benefit to others. So then, again, if you already have a technique that you use on a regular basis, then to use that. If not, then the method can be used is to generate an awareness of the sensation of the air as it passes in through the nostrils and passes out, and try to maintain the focus on that, experience of the sensation, air coming in and out, but also maintaining that alertness, the alertness of mind, so that when the distractions arise, you note these, just to be aware of the distracting thoughts or of the sounds, to note them and to keep that perspective that our business here is to remain in the present moment, so as to condition our mind in the best way for today's teachings and so on. And so then keeping the mind focused on the breath as it passes in and passes out like this. And continuing like this for the first few minutes of this session. So then our main body of the meditation around the subject of attachment. Geshe-la mentioned yesterday attachment quite a deal, and how it is a source of suffering and the creation of non-virtue. But firstly, then, it's important to identify what attachment is and to distinguish it very clearly from the minds of loving kindness and compassion. So then, when attachment is defined, it's described as being a non-virtuous mental factor or affliction which exaggerates the positive qualities of an object or person. It turns the person into an object anyway and wishes to possess that object or person. Often described like being like mental glue. Or like an ant, having this mind is like an ant caught in honey. When we generate this mind, or like a spider caught, or like a fly caught in a spider's web. Or like oil embedded in cloth material, very difficult to remove. Anger might be more damaging, but attachment has this tendency to, with our mind, we tend to see it as a source of happiness. So very difficult to separate our mind from this quality of attachment when it arises, when the mind adheres to its object. Very difficult to stop it. Whereas on the other hand, love is the wish for others to be happy. Compassion is the wish for them to be free from suffering. They're described as virtuous mental factors. They don't exaggerate the positive qualities of the object and bring the result of happiness. When love and compassion are really developed in the spiritual path, they are also non-conditional. They arise on the basis of recognizing our intimate connectedness with others, that we come into this world within the body of another being. That being could die giving birth to us. And this has happened infinite past lives. Beings have cared for us and protected us. And throughout this life, we are dependent upon others for our food and our clothing and our shelter and our education. And we're dependent upon others for our spiritual development. We can't develop the quality of generosity without a recipient. We can't establish a firm foundation of ethics of non-harm without other beings. And we can't develop the skill of not getting angry without someone or something challenging us. So when we understand that, then these minds of loving kindness and compassion are not conditional depending upon what the other person gives us in terms of relationships, because they've already given us those things. We are in debt to them. So it's appropriate to generate the mind of loving kindness and compassion. And from out of this will flow our own fulfillment and the fulfillment of others. Beings like the Dalai Lama are an embodiment of compassion, but not only compassion, it's wisdom, because the compassion that they have arises in dependence on the experience of reality. And that reality leads to that experience of reality leads to the mind of effortless compassion and loving kindness. But attachment, on the other hand, even when we do good deeds to others who are close to us, with the mind of attachment, it's done with condition, and condition, even if on an unconscious level, it's what we'll get back in terms from the other person, a sense of security or whatever, their companionship or whatever. And so this attachment always carries with it a shadow of anger. Anger is attachment that doesn't get its own way. It's like a child's mind. There's an expectation of getting something back. And if we don't get it back, we get upset. And then the words come out. And the actions come out. Which can be part of the history of our life. But actually, as we grew, no one most likely taught us anything about this. We went through school, received an education, but no one gave us guidance about the difference between attachment and love and compassion. So it's not surprising if we have a history of creating suffering for ourselves and others based on the attachment mind. But we can do, every day reflect on the Buddha's teachings on the first noble truth can help us to lessen our attachment and also help us to understand the mistakes we've made in the past and then generate regret for those actions. So 2,500 years ago, the Buddha taught Four Noble Truths, and the first was the truth of suffering. And its most gross level, suffering is described as the experience of sickness, aging, and death. And so if we really understand that, that comes with life. That is an integral part of life, that we experience sickness, aging, and death. That no matter what we do, no matter how much money we spend, we can't prevent this type of reality. No matter how much we try to cling on to our life, we can't stop it from ending. No matter how much we cling to our youth, we can't stop ourselves from aging. And no matter how much we cling on to our health, there's no guarantee that we can maintain good health. So the Buddha taught 2,500 years ago that advice for living the life, that wisdom was existing in the world then. And a more subtle level within that first truth, more subtle level of suffering, is the reality of having to confront things that we don't like to confront. Meaning that we may have attachments for the way that things should be. This is how life should be, and these other things shouldn't happen. The reality is we are confronted with unfortunate circumstances, having to deal with different people, having to deal with events that we don't wish to happen. And then within this is suffering of being separated from the things that we like, the nature of impermanence. But attachment does not want us to believe this. So we adhere to things even though they are impermanent. So the more we adhere and cling to things, it's like licking honey off a razor blade. Because it means these things we separate away from. And the stronger our mind is attached, the more suffering will occur. And then there's the suffering of not getting what we want. So a very strong, desirous attachment energy. The more we develop the addictive mind, the more that we experience that dissatisfaction of not getting things, which the Buddha taught as advice for living, gave that advice 2,500 years ago. Advice that brings peace to the mind is a protection against non-virtue. But there are some psychologists now who are saying, particularly in America, where a lot of the depression, a lot of the anger, depression is existing within the minds of particular people with the characteristic, the view that life should be fair. And if we understood the Buddha's teachings on suffering, we would understand very clearly that life is very often unfair. That the things that we wish to possess, we don't find, and we get separated from the things that we hold on to, people and so on, partners, so on, like this. And so because of that lack of knowledge of the first teaching of the Buddha, so much depression, so much anger, so much non-virtue, so much distress is created. And so now, just to use our own personal experience, look over our life. But firstly, maybe here we can invoke the presence of the Buddha. Here is a way of doing purification, to invoke the presence of the Buddha and any other holy being you connect with, or any deity, maybe Bodhisattva, maybe the Buddha, maybe the Dalai Lama, a being that you see as the embodiment of wisdom and compassion. And then, as you engage in this meditation practice, experience their presence right there. You're invoking them, requesting their support as you do the meditation. And just think about how it is, because there's a habit of attachment, but also because you've never been given guidance from an early age, no guidance about the harmfulness of attachment. Then look back over your childhood, your relationship with your parents, and how no one ever taught you about the shortcomings of attachment. No one ever taught you about the lack of wisdom in saying, I want, therefore I should have. So how many times in your childhood, based on attachment, what I should have, did you express words of hostility to your parents? Maybe even because the food you received wasn't what you wanted. Didn't expect that tonight, I wanted something better. Wanted to do this, but they wouldn't let me do this. Perhaps even Christmas time, I expected this Christmas present, but what I got wasn't good enough. And just sense how that attachment mind works. That when you're fixated on what you want, you see that person, that's their job. My mum's job, my father's job is to give me what I want. If they have children, they have a responsibility to give me what I want. And how it is with that attachment mind, you don't think, because you're focused on yourself, you don't think about them and what they're doing to help you, all the money they're spending and the time, the worry and so on they have. You're oblivious to this with the mind of attachment. And even with the mind of attachment, you have an idea of how things should be in that family. I want it to be this way, my family life to be this way. And even, I want my parents to be a particular way. Why aren't you like someone else, someone else's parent? And of course, with the mind of attachment, there's no space for sense of gratitude because it's always what I want. Never appreciation for what's been given to you. No words of gratitude. And so then also just to move on from that relationship with our parents as a child, but then we grow up and we enter into a relationship with someone else, a partner. So how often in that relationship there was times of conflict? Was it really arising out of what I want, my expectations of what you should give me? Again, that same infantile attitude that says, I want, therefore I should have. And so when that person doesn't give you what you want, your expectation, this attachment has got this expectation of what the other person should give, then they appear to be the source of your unhappiness because they're not providing you with what I want. And so how many sharp words spoken and maybe actions of violence in that relationship based on attachment? So then just to generate a mind of regret where you might have been performing these acts and to hold the image of the holy beings and the idea that in the future then to maintain that mind of refuge, the growing in security based on taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, rather than to relate to others, get security on the basis of attachment. So just to conclude now, to dedicate whatever positive results from meditating in this way towards purifying the mind and lessening the mind of attachment so that we can use the rest of this life in a more skillful way to be of benefit to ourselves and to others. So thank you.